Welcome to the Workology Podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller-Merrill, founder of Workology.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of Workology.
In 2017, there will be 65,000 H-1B visas granted to the over 300,000 applications. Given the crazy economic climate right now, there is a lot of uncertainty when it comes to the topic of immigration and President Trump's administration. I thought it best that we discuss things as business leaders when it comes to immigration. What can we expect, what we can change, and the impact that immigration has on our businesses, human resources, and the economy. I'd like to introduce my guest, immigration attorney John Veely. He's the CEO of Online Visas, and he'll be talking with us about immigration, the new rules for the H-1B visa today. Welcome to the Workology Podcast, John.
Thanks, Jessica.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the H-1B immigration process for employers? Because I know we have an important date, April 1st, coming up for submitting visa applications.
Absolutely. So the H-1B is really the visa for white-collar workers, right? It requires a university degree or the equivalent. And what I mean by equivalent is for every 3 years of work experience in a particular industry, that equals 1 year of university for a particular type of degree. So if somebody had to drop out after 2 years or got an associate's degree, they can make up for that with 6 years of work experience to get the H-1B. The H-1B is based on a number of principles. One is that not only does the job have to require a university degree, but the job has to pay what's called a prevailing wage. So you have to obtain a prevailing wage determination, and that determination is going to look at what are the wages for the county and state where the job's going to be. So obviously, Santa Clara County in Silicon Valley is going to have a higher prevailing wage than maybe Wichita, Kansas, right? So it's particular to that, and that protects American workers so that, foreign labor is not hired at a cheaper level for that. There's also a process where the employer has to post the job for 10 days in a conspicuous or well-seen place within the company to show everybody in the company that there's a job available. They also have to file what's called a labor condition application, which takes about 7 to 10 days with the Department of Labor, and they would sign off on the job and the wage and that sort of thing. And then they can file the visa with USCIS. Now, there's lots of different wrinkles with the H-1B, but the typical one is going to be subject to a numeric cap. There are 65,000 visas available for a fiscal year, and the fiscal year starts October 1st. So all the visas have to have October 1st as their start date, and regulations allow you to apply for a visa 6 months earlier. So April 1 is the day for all cap types of visas. H-1B visas, and so it will stay open for about 5 days typically if there's enough, right? And so what happens is so many come in. Last year, 335,000. That they have a lottery, and the lottery is open for 5 days, and then closed, and then so all those visas that come in, they then analyze them, and then so there's a couple things they're looking at. So there's 65,000 for the standard H-1B for cap types companies. And cap companies are really companies that aren't exempted for certain reasons. So exempted companies are universities or some nonprofits that are affiliated with universities, maybe the same regions. They have to be pretty tightly tied together. Some government was federal, is now expanded with some new rules into some other types of government positions are not exempt. But so the exempt ones, they're going to look at that. In addition to the 65,000, there is another 20,000 for graduates of U.S. universities that have an advanced degree, meaning a master's degree or a PhD. They have their own 20,000. And then carved out of the 65,000 is an exemption under treaties for Chile and Singapore. Those two countries have treaties, and they are not subject to the cap, but everybody from those countries is counted against the cap. So there's probably more information than you need, but a sort of an overview of what's taken, and you kind of go through these steps to then file it with immigration, and typically they're going to take a number of months to come back. If they accept the case, then they'll tell you, and if they don't accept the case because you didn't lottery, they send you everything back, including your filing fees, and you have to wait another year to do that.
It sounds really complicated.
Can be.
And what are some of the biggest surprises that employers face when they deal with the H-1B application process, submittal process?
Well, I think what they need to know is, kind of what there's a few prongs, right? So number one, is the job professional? Not all jobs are. So here's how you can determine that they are. There is an online source called ONET that lists out professional jobs, and you can go onto this website. It's a government-based website. Another thing that immigration will push back on is they'll ask, how many times have you hired other people in this job and required this degree? So sometimes it's a lot of times, and it's always a good idea that if that has happened, to maybe put a list of who those employees were and with their degree and list that out. If it's the first time they've hired one of these, or say a company's really growing, another thing to do is look into want ads in the industry and see if there are other similarly sized companies in the same industry that are hiring somebody in a similar position, and then putting those want ads in. So we like to think of where are they going to see the problems, and how can we ahead of time raise answers to those problems and present it to them.
Awesome. Well, let's take a bit of a reset here. This is Jessica Miller Merrill, and you're listening to the Workology podcast. We're talking today about H-1B visas and the process with John Veely. You can follow John on Twitter at Online Visas. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about President Trump. And we're not going to get political here.
Right.
But there's been a lot of things going on the last few weeks. So can you talk us through a little bit about the executive order and then how this might impact employers?
Very good. So there is an executive order, and then there's a couple of leaked executive orders that haven't dropped yet. And so I'm going to talk about the one that has come out, and then if you want, I can talk about the one that hasn't come out, that'll probably have more of an impact if it does come out on work visas. So the executive order that has been published is one that puts a freeze, I think is probably the most non-political way to describe it, on 7 countries in the Middle East, and immediately, right? And let's talk about what it did, and then kind of what it's doing now, right? So initially, that freeze was for any citizen of these countries, even if they were dual citizens. So if they were German and Iranian, like one of our clients, then they would have been subject to the freeze. Also, initially, the freeze had barred even green card holders from entering, and this was what went too far in a lot of people's eyes. So, in going back and looking at all of the sort of the conversations and pushback that happened, that what we heard is that immigration didn't want to have the green cards included in that bar, but the White House did. Why I say White House is we're not exactly sure who in the White House had that impact. There's been some statements on it, but definitely from that part of the government. And so green card people were originally excluded. Then the White House sort of rolled it back. So this thing kind of broke on a Saturday, and by Sunday, and where people were protesting at the airport, and there had been some pushback, they had at least rolled back the freeze on green card holders. Also, we saw some things that were unfortunate because of this wide net that was thrown out. So while immigration and or state departments have had freezes on other governments before. It usually comes on the heels of some sort of event, not just the change of a government in the United States, but usually an event like a bombing or some fear of some terrorist activity or something like this. So this was surprising because it just kind of came out of nowhere. Congress didn't even know it was coming, and people were shocked. They were literally in the air. And some of the negative things we saw out of it is that there's at least some rumors, don't know if they're true, that people were told if they gave up or abandoned their green cards, it would be easier on them. And they lost their green cards over it. So that was an unfortunate thing. We saw some people turned around, some brothers, and sent back to another country. And then their country seized their passports, and they're sort of stuck in limbo. So, some people that got caught up in this. Now, at the end of the day, a federal court, two of them, one in Brooklyn, one in Seattle, had ruled that this freeze or ban, some people are calling it, was unconstitutional, and so it's been lifted. So right now, people are able to travel, but we don't know if that court decision will be appealed, and if it's appealed, what they'll say. So, we're counseling our clients who come from these countries to be pretty careful. Probably not the best idea to travel right now if they don't have to. But we're hearing concerns from all of our clients, or I shouldn't say all of them, lots of our clients from many countries, wondering if this could impact them. Would their country come next? Those sort of things.
So let's talk a little bit about the one that isn't yet public, but we've seen copies of it that have been leaked that is likely going to impact employers more.
So this one has a date on it of January 30th, and dated January 23rd. We saw it on January 30th, and it's called the Executive Order on Protecting American Jobs and Workers by Strengthening the Integrity of Foreign Worker Visa Programs. Now, it's essentially a directive. It does not do what the freeze of the 7 countries executive order did, and this is important. Matter of fact, maybe the freeze of the other countries, if handled the way this one was handled, would have had less backlash. So I don't know, but in any case, the freeze of the 7 countries was immediate. It impacted people, and it says here's what it is now. A new order. This one calls for a number of reports to be done on a series of visas. The B visa, which is a visitor visa, the J visa, which is a work and study visa. They want to look at the impact of EADs. Those are employment authorization documents. Those are given to people in a variety of ways. Spouses of certain visas get them. Students in what's called optional practical training get them. That's the EAD. They want to know who's getting the EAD and how that's impacting people or Americans and their jobs. They want to look at the H-1B visa, as we talked about a little bit. They want to look at the L visa, which is for multinational companies that move their executives in here. They're looking at that visa from a perspective of what about companies that then put their employees offsite in other companies. They want to investigate that. They're actually calling for L1s to actually have site visits in that sort of scenario. I think that's really probably targeting or potentially targeting Indian staffing companies. Maybe some of the larger ones, maybe not the smaller ones, but I think they're looking at the E2 visa, which is a treaty investor visa. This is where if you're from 30-some countries, you can invest to open a company in the United States. And the overall question in this executive order, I think, is the important part, Jessica. And what they're asking is, in these reports, is how do these visas impact American workers? Fair question, right? However, it's not the only question, and it's a dangerous question if it's the only question. And what I mean by that is that if you only look at how it may impact American workers, and you don't look at how further tightening regulations in immigration will impact American companies, then you really run the risk of losing American companies to other countries, right? And that's really where I think the conversation or the dialogue needs to go. Right? We need to look at the pros and cons of this, right? Nothing is black and white. And if you do A, it's going to impact B. What we saw that I think is really important is with the Muslim ban, as it's been called in its most negative light, the stock market dropped 200 points that day, that Monday, right? And it closed 112 down, the biggest hit it's had since October of last year. And that had just a glancing blow on companies. And it's thrown these companies up in arms. We've seen a lot of CEOs, a lot of major companies in the U.S. filing lawsuits and attacking that this is really bad for their business, right? This has no impact compared to what would happen if the H-1B visas were lowered and they couldn't hire this sort of talent. If the L visas were not available to the way they were, because with the H-1B cap, we now have to look at these international companies that are moving people to the United States and subcontracting them to our companies. It puts us in a really disadvantaged spot in our best and brightest industry, right? And they're looking at, you can just see in the language of how they talk about it. We want to make sure that the best and brightest get the visas for the H-1B. We're not looking for extraordinary ability in the H-1B. We're looking for people who have degrees that can do these jobs. And one of the things that I think is lost in the conversation, and it really needs to go there, is that America ranks 25th and 27th in math and science. But we have the most innovative tech sector in the world. How do we do that, right? Well, because we're importing that talent. Our companies are able to scour the world for the best people and enough people to come over to America and create jobs. And when these jobs are created, now they may be created for foreign nationals, but they're created in America, and that creates ancillary jobs in America. So, these people need to have managers, right? They need to have the ancillary jobs, marketing, sales, executive management level positions that are around this production component or this R&D component. And if those jobs have to leave because you just don't have enough positions to have them, or what we're seeing in some of the bills, and I can go in this a little bit, where it's no longer prevailing wage, but maybe it's a minimum wage of, say, 100,000, which is arbitrary, 130,000 that is arbitrary, and that's what you have to pay people at all. Then it's no longer, is it cheaper to do it in India or America? It's if in America you have an American worker that gets to pay what the market bears, and this other worker that may be better at the job has 150% higher salary just to enter the door, companies will leave. They can go to Vancouver, which is just across from Seattle. They can set up these operations completely in other countries, and I think there'll be a number of countries standing in line to take Silicon Valley. And so I think this is really important in the conversation, that we have to look at all these sides, because that will really drastically impact our companies. Stocks will lower, and it'll go there. Now, do I think that will happen? No. We are recruiting incredible students to come here. And the reason the incredible students are coming here is not only are the universities better, but they want to go into our workforce. They want to work for our companies. And because of this H-1B cap and these arbitrary bans, we're losing great people. So the universities are going to get hurt if they can't continue to attract the really talented folks in these, what they call STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math areas, because there's no outlet for them to go into what has been our very vibrant market, our best market right now. Trying to reform all of immigration through an executive order really sort of steps on the toes of Congress. That's what they do. Immigration is typically reformed by Congress, and there's a number of bills in Congress. But I think those bills are more reactionary, are trying to set these arbitrary numeric codes to solve a problem that I don't think is as big of a problem as they think it is. And that's the problem that Americans are losing their jobs in the tech sector to these foreigners that are coming in and poaching them. The reality is our companies are starved for as much talent as they can. Really good American programmers are getting these jobs. Not saying that there hasn't been some abuses, but not enough to throw out the baby with the bathwater and hinder our companies. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing from the executive order and really kind of what I think the Trump administration is trying to do.
This is great, because normally we're just seeing about how the executive order is impacting, but we're not looking forward and looking at maybe our strategy as an employer, conversations that we need to be having with other HR leaders or CEOs to talk about the future state of our workforce and education.
I'm glad you said that. I mean, because this is a time unlike any other. I don't think we have to sit back in the HR field or the legal field or just as people and say, hey, this thing's just going to happen. I think we're in a time of change, and I think opinions are important. And what I would suggest to any of your listeners that are in the American industry, right, is that the jobs that are going to be lost, the real jobs that are going to be lost, if our companies can't hire worldwide for professional jobs, is a lot of American jobs. For every 100 STEM graduate, whether an American or foreign degree, created 44 ancillary jobs. That's unbelievable, right? 44 people got jobs because of these 100 getting jobs, right? So I watched this when the H-1B caps started happening. I was a corporate counsel in a tech company in Dallas, and I'm kind of dating myself, but there was a bubble. They called it a bubble, and they popped the bubble, and they did it by raising interest rates, and it was the head of the Fed, going into the election between Gore and Bush. And so we had a really, really kind of crazy boomtown economy going on. And so we popped the technology bubble. One of the things that happened is these numeric caps started happening. It was at 150 before it was at 65. But by putting these caps on, we weren't able to recruit all the techies we were doing. I remember the companies I was in, without having that, were losing American managerial jobs. Folks that had six-figure incomes had to be underemployed after that. They left a really nice management job at our tech company and had to go find other jobs. And it just has a chilling effect. And I think that's what could happen right now. So it's important that we see this coming down, and that we say, hey, wait a second. So what can someone do? Well, I think a couple of things. One is they could personally reach out to their local representative and say, hey, are you guys thinking this thing through? Do you really want to hurt American companies from being able to hire whoever they need to continue to make, wonderful technology and everything that's happening and innovate the way they are? Or they can go to their company's leadership, who may be involved in an association or have their own lobbyists, right? And those people can present this side of the story, right? Or they can start compiling personal stories. I think what's happening in this new world we're in right now is it's too easy to push people into some sort of group, whether they're, Muslims or whether they're Indian programmers or whatever. These are people, they have names, and they do good things, right? So think about the folks that are on visas within your company and how impactful they have been to your company. Write down their names, create case studies, talk about it, and push it out to these people. Push it out to your representatives, push it to your company leadership, and say, look, because of this gentleman or this lady right here, we've done all sorts of great things, and it's really impacted our company in this way. And if you start looking at it that way, and we start talking about these being people, and we start talking about their positive impact and how that has given other positive impact, then I think we can hopefully head this off, or maybe it's an opportunity to make it better. And I think that's when there's change, it can go either way. As opposed to just sitting back and bracing for it and hoping it's not bad. I think folks should learn this stuff, learn what's coming down, and get engaged if they can.
Good advice, and something that I definitely think we should all be considering. You mentioned earlier in the conversation about outsourced companies surrounding the H-1B visas. And this was something that was surprising to me that I didn't realize until I started digging into this a little bit. Can you talk about their use of the H-1B visa and how this would additionally impact the market, the American jobs market?
So yes, there are, if you look at the top 10 or so, I think you have a graphic that you've used on Workology and that shows, who some of the leaders are. And a number of them are our big companies. You see Microsoft up there and Apple and things like that. But then you also see some outsourced companies like Infosys and Tata and things like that. But, in addition to those monster ones that are pulling down the largest number of H-1Bs. Last night I met with 250 owners of smaller Indian staffing companies. These folks are important. They're important to the market. They will recruit, they will vet good, talented workers, and they'll come in really on project basis, right? Where an employee isn't needed permanently to do something, but they can come in with some skill and take care of these things. And they're doing it in America, right? These are folks in America that are paying payroll taxes, that are buying American goods and services. They're definitely an asset to the economy. I met them. They're worried. That being said, I think for the most part, they're very confident that these are just fears. This will all work out. But we've essentially imported world-class science and math into America. We've had a number of Nobel winners this year. Every one of them are immigrants. This is part of the American dream. They come here because the environment is more creative for them. It's a great way where they can better monetize this, and they can give back, and then they become company owners themselves. It's fantastic. We really need to think hard about not just attacking things because we don't get it, we don't like something about it, because this is a very, very valuable thing to our company that if we lost it and we shut this off, it would really take away, one of the things that we're really best at. Look, these are heroes, not villains, from my perspective.
Well, let's talk a little bit about you and switch things up a little bit and talk a little bit about the technology and the new approach that you've developed for processing visas, including the H-1B. Walk us through that. What does that look like?
Cool. Thank you. Because I'm very excited about this. So like I said, I've been an immigration attorney for, my 24th year. What we did is we invented what we call a menu of visas, and we listed all the different type of visas. You could click on it, you could learn more. And because of that, we started getting some notoriety. We got an award from the American Bar Association for legal access to justice, they called it. And we're called innovators, and we started getting some really great clients like Bell Laboratories, some really world-class clients came out of nowhere from our firm in Oklahoma, because through the internet, we were able to represent people anywhere, and we had a process doing it. So evolving that forward, we kind of developed a business model of strategy and flat fee pricing, and guaranteeing our work that if we didn't get approved, we'd do it again for free, and creating this briefing process, because I've litigated. So I wanted to litigate on paper and make our visas look more like a magazine that really personified folks that may have a tough to pronounce name, and talk about the company and why it needed to recruit worldwide, and talk about the position and why it met it, and really kind of brief it, because immigration attorneys typically don't brief. They write a couple page cover letter. And I thought, you know what, every other lawyer briefs. Let's brief, and let's do it in a really beautiful way. And that helped us get this 94% approval rating. And that we did that for years. And so I decided I wanted to launch Online Visas into its own company. And we did that about 6-7 months ago. So we created a technology kind of like the Uberization of law. And the traditional way to grow a law firm is to open offices, wherever. So, one of our bigger competitors will open an office in Cairo, or one in Paris, or, Johannesburg and Shanghai. What we've done is created a communications hub where we can vet really good attorneys around the world, and then just agree to share the cases, share the legal fees. If I take a client in and I want to send it over to Germany, we work together to make sure that our American client is handled well, and we both get compensated for that. And then the software then organizes the communication. It can guarantee that you're going to get an update every day from your legal team, because it automates it, right? And it allows us to operate off this communication platform that has a series of steps in the particular visa, and the list of documents you need to upload. And then whenever the steps get done, it pings it. And at the end of every day, every one of our clients learns of where they are. We're no matter where they are in the network. So we're in 25 countries. Over 34 firms have participated in some level. We are talking to these Indian tech companies on how we can do massive numbers. We want to do 1,000 H-1Bs this year, because we've taken it to the next level is we've now created document production in this. And because the attorneys is very important, immigration's hard. And so I've built it in a way that either the attorney or the client can initiate it by giving us just a little information about the person and what type of job they want. And then from that, we can then have a strategy session. And essentially what it does is it forces me or the other attorneys involved to ask a series of questions, and we can put those answers in there. And with this username and password, we're essentially creating a couple of things. One, a legal opinion that the client can see and remember what the questions and answers are, as opposed to the old style where we'd write it on a yellow pad and put it in a file, and the client would have to remember what we said. right? And so this automated, it makes it quick. They can see it, they can add to it, and we can collaborate back and forth to make sure we have the best chance of getting this now more hard to get visa approved. And then the second part of what it does is through these strategy questions and another series of questions that we ask of our clients, not that we're asking them to fill out, we then pre-populate all the documents that go into a case. So I talked to you before about the notice of posting and the employment letter and how important it is to break these things down. And in the brief we write, right, with the pretty pictures and the case law and all these sort of stuff, we're now able to click a button and create a visa in literally, if we have the information, about 5 minutes. This is something that had taken weeks to do. And this allows us to handle so many more cases, but not lose the quality of the attorney. It allows the attorney to go in and spot issues and brief on that. But we can do the second case after the first case. There's another 5 minutes, there's another 5 minutes, there's another 5 minutes. And we can go in and say, okay, here's the distinction between case one and case two. We spend, say 30 minutes to an hour on something that would have taken weeks to fix. But we bill by the case. So we want it to be fast. Our client wants to be fast. We want to collaborate with them. So we invented this because it didn't exist. And we're starting to see it work really well. And lawyers around the world sharing cases and helping our clients here in the U.S. Get their cases done fast. It's a fun situation and an incredible challenge.
It's immigration meets collaboration with technology.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well,
Thanks.
John, thank you for joining us today. Where can people go to learn more about you and what you do?
Well, thanks. OnlineVisas.com is the website for the company, and VLeLaw.com is the website for the law firm. Facebook pages at Online Visas. We've done a lot of YouTube videos, so check out our YouTube channel for Online Visas, and we're really out there all over the place. We like to write a lot. Online Visas has a lot of articles on these things we talked about today, and this week I'm coming out with a book. So would love if anybody wants to get in touch with me or drop me an email at jon@onlinevisas.com or give us a call at 405-310-4333. I'm glad to talk to anybody about, minutia case issues or, to how a company could restructure their entire immigration processing to, what do you think about the politics on this stuff? I'm glad to talk about it.
Awesome. Well, we'll link to some of John's resources that he mentioned earlier in the transcript of the podcast. Thank you for joining us today for the Workology podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader who's tired of the status quo. I'm tired of the status quo. This is Jessica Miller Merrill. Until next time, you can visit the newly launched and rebranded Workology.com site to listen to all our previous Workology podcast episodes. We'll talk to you soon.
Production services for the Workology podcast with Jessica Miller Merrill provided by TotalPicture.com.